We've tried to review all our this thing on the ethnicity. You tend to see and bear with me that in this lecture so far, we've tried to look at racism and ethnicity. And we've been able to define what racism is all about and ethnicity. And we have looked at understanding the differences between racism and ethnicity. We've been able to look at ethnicity versus nationality, ethnicity versus culture, and theories of ethnicity. Try to look at the historical perspectives. We've looked at social inequality. That's where we were last week, and which were defined from the social inequality from Wikipedia definition. We try to look at it as social inequality that occurs when resources in our given society are distributed unevenly. And when they are distributed in this format, and notably seen is the typical true norms of allocation. It entails with gender. You tend to see that certain genders are favored. They are being considered first among the people. Not only that, the patterns by which it's being done has been looked into. And we tend to note that that it engenders specific patterns along lines of socially defined categories of persons. It is the differentiation preference of access of social goods in the society brought about by power. And we said that you have to look at power when social inequality is being displayed. Religion is being considered. Kinship is being considered. In every society, you see that prestige, race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, and especially class are one of the conditions being looked into as far as social inequality is concerned. Social inequality usually implies to the lack of equality of outcome. It might not be based on what those people, the time they arrive, or whatever is being considered. So social inequality usually implies to the lack of equality of outcome, but may alternatively be conceptualized in terms of the lack of equality of access to opportunity. Therefore, the social rights include labor market, because when you get to the labor market, there are some people who are being favored than others. And another factor being considered is the social, the source of income of the people. People are being classified by healthcare, especially when you discover that in this coronavirus now, most of the people cannot travel out. People who their healthcare is not in order. So everybody still have to queue up because nobody can run away from their own, because they have not taken care of the place. So by so doing, you'll be able to see this issue of social inequality. And like this coronavirus now is what make everybody to be almost at the same pedestal. But you still discover that in this situation, some people are still more favored because of power, because of class, because of their income. So social inequality linked to economic inequality and usually described on the basis of unequal distribution of income or wealth. And it's when you look at this, it's something that has been socially studied as social inequality. Although in the disciplines of economics and sociology generally, they use different theoretical approaches to examine and explain economic inequality. Both fields are actively involved in researching this inequality. So, however, beloved, I want you to understand, as far as this course is concerned, social and natural resources, other than purely economic resources, are also unevenly distributed. In most societies, and many contribute to social status. This is where status comes from. You see some people living in certain areas. Norms of allocation can also affect the distribution of rights and privileges. Social power is another thing. So, norms of allocation can also affect distribution of rights and privileges. Social power also, access to public goods such as education or the judicial system. Not everybody has access to the judicial system. Not everybody has adequate housing, has access to adequate housing, transportation. And most especially when it comes to financial institutions, not everybody knows exactly what is going on for credit and financial services, such as banking and other social goods and services. So, social inequality comes in most of the time and it affects the people. So, many societies worldwide claim to base things on merit, and that's what I was trying to talk to you about last week, to be meritocracies. That is, that their societies exclusively distribute resources on the basis of merit. And this is what Michael Young, in his own assertion in 1958, The Rise of Meritocracy, to demonstrate the social dysfunctions that he anticipated arising in societies where the elites believe that they are successful entirely on the basis of merit. So they just look at other people that, well, everybody must go through that same process. So social inequality could be seen and be evidenced in all our day-to-day activities. Like Young was concerned that the tripartite system for education being practiced in the United Kingdom at the time when he wrote this essay considered merit to be intelligence plus effort its possessors identified at an early age and selected for appropriate intensive education, and the obsession with qualification, test scoring, and qualifications. So it's supported will create an educated middle class elite at the expense of the education of the working class, inevitably resulting in injustice and eventually revolution will definitely take place. So in all these things we need to understand that although merit matters, to some degree in many societies. Research shows that the distribution of resources in societies often follows hierarchical social categorization of persons to a degree too significant to warrant calling these societies meritocratic society. Since even exceptional intelligence, true talent, or other forms of merit may not be compensatory for the social disadvantage people face. So therefore, in many cases, social inequality is linked to racial inequality, ethnic inequality, and gender inequality. So these three things you have to look at: racial inequality, ethnic inequality, and gender inequality. You see it in everyday life, as well as other social statuses. And these forms can be related to corruption. This is why even in some societies they legalize corruption. They call it as tip. So these things are almost everywhere. The most common metric for comparing social inequality is different in different nations is the Gini coefficient, which measures the concentration of wealth and income in a nation from zero, even distributed wealth and income, to one. One person has all wealth and income. Two nations may have identical Gini coefficients, but dramatically different economic output and or quality of life. So the Gini coefficient must be contextualized for meaningful comparisons to be made. And that is why this inequality is so much in the society and in the world today. Having said that, I want us to consider social inequality in the 21st century, as we are going to close this lecture today and to continue later at a later date. So social inequality is traditionally defined as the existence of unequal opportunities for different social positions or statuses for various individuals within a group or society. And normally it refers to people of different genders, ages, and ethnicities. Yet from what I've observed in my life so far, these are not where I believe the biggest areas of social prejudice and justice job attainment are. And permit me to submit at this point that I think certainly in the past, the areas of gender and ethnicity were where the greatest areas of social prejudice were. But in more recent years, as the world has become more understanding of people in different races and different genders, we have seen a new key social difference emerge. This key social difference we see today is that the world and job prospects are now decided by personal contacts and selfish internal business decisions. Diplomatically, you see it. In economy, you see it. Politically, you see it. In banking, you see it. In most of the working places, you see it. So personal contacts and selfish internal business decisions are there. I think those days in the civil service, what normally happens is that contracts can be awarded, but before you know, it's being internal business decisions that is being done. So therefore, to a large degree, I see that the world today does not reward merit. And that's why anybody can be given any title or can be given position. Nearly as much as it was rewarded in past centuries. So, but now, merit is not being rewarded. Even in the country where we live, In this article, that is what I will be discussing, and then I will be explaining how this presents a real danger to the future of our world as we conclude. If we think back to the vast majority of second millennium, we look back on a world where a few great barons controlled the vast majority of global wealth. When you consider like William the Conqueror in England, Bukalia A. Romanov in Russia, Carnegie and Rockefeller in America, and the weirdest of them all, Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire. Musa is obviously the most interesting person to look at, particularly because by most estimates he was worth double that of Rockefeller. This is for me to say Mansa, who most of you won't have heard of, was an obscure 14th century African king and had an inflation adjusted fortune of 400 billion US dollars. So he ruled West Africa's Malian Empire, exploiting West Africa's vast salt and gold production. Why could he amass such a large fortune? Principally because that was a time where kings all around the world owned all of a country's resources. William the Conqueror, England, is another example, who happened to be a commander or commanding over England around the time of that same country's economic peak. So I want you to look at it that all these things has been happening, and you need to study the historic perspective of this. Later on in the millennium, we saw the influence of those in political power. Their political power decreased, particularly in the New World, i.e. in America, where the great fortunes of the 1800s and 1900s were held by business barons like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Ford. So in those early days of 1900s and earlier, merit was rewarded, despite vast majority of wealth being held by a few people. So as an employee, the work you did was mostly physical and monotonous. Very, very monotonous. Most of the work you do is physical and monotonous. You simply went into a job that was very simplistic, and whereupon you most did the same thing over and over again. Take, for example, Henry Ford and his production car assembly lines were a clear example of this. The work that went on was so productive. More cars were being made. More efficient methods of oil refinery were happening, starting with the 1901 monopolistic ruling against Standard Oil, though which broke the company up into 16 different oil entities. We saw the power of the true entrepreneur becoming eroded. Although it didn't happen right away, it is interesting to know that one of the only big entrepreneur types we saw in the mid part of the 1900s was Howard Hughes, the eccentric aviation and movie businessman of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So I want to begin to look at it either economically, politically, or in a form of diplomatic, that social inequality is what brought about this social class, and it gives power to people, and then it begins to come depending on what the person can use at that material time. The reason is because starting with the Standard Oil monopoly ruling in 1901, politicians figured out ways to reassert their power. They saw that the Carnegies and Rockefellers were becoming more powerful than even them. So they started to regulate the business environment. So, which means people begin to look at what can I do now to regulate this person, to determine what this person, where he can live, what he can do, his movement, his thinking. Partly because of this, we saw the rise of the corporation and the decline of the entrepreneur enterprise. An employee's primary focus of these heavily regulated companies became even less on their production and more so on how can I help my job, and in order to figure out ways of keeping their jobs. Prejudices were so much, and were made by predominant white male individuals to other of different genders and ethnicities. So they begin to rule, they begin to determine what goes on and what is to happen. So in the 1970s, we began to witness the rise of the computer revolution. And in the 1990s, we saw the advent of the internet. Together, these two massive events meant that we entered in the dawn of a new age. The information age replaced the industrial age. This critically meant that the focus shifted from reproduction to acquisition and displaying of information. It then became less important on the amount that someone could actually produce in a day, and therefore less important to gain an employee base purely on merit. This is why merit now began to erode. But this was combined with other events such as abolition of slavery in the US in 1807, the civil rights movement in the 1970s, and the women's liberation movement of the majority of the United States. So to the politician in power, they suddenly began to see that they will not be able to continue to reside in power if they continue to show support to women and people of color. So they made laws that made everyone appear equal. Today, we see a lot of talk in government and private businesses about having equal representation of color and gender on their boards and in their companies. Most of the time, people say, okay, we need some female gender, we need some male gender, all those things. No, everybody, we need this ethnic group and all those things. So it's based on that. But these liberation movements have not eliminated social prejudice in the workforce. And similarly, on the sports field, all they have done is shifted it. People in power, in both government and private business, discriminate today towards people due to their reasons. Like because they don't have the right. They don't have the right. Contacts, family or otherwise. Or because themselves feel by so doing that by employing someone who is too good, they, the employer, will have their job taken by the person they employed. And because of us now being in the information age, the level of our person's production is just not as important as it was then. So the big problem that this new age of social prejudice has created is that today we largely live in an environment of fake results. In day-to-day life, you see fake results in every area of life. Many people today in business and the government put on a suit, walk out the door, and immediately think that they are at work and producing results. No, no, no. Obviously, no results are actually being produced. All that has actually happened is that the person has put on a different piece of clothing and walk out of their door. This age of fake results has been that most people's lives are now financed by credit. And most governments around the world are now seen by many to be corrupt. So, in this life, and I've been an employer of labor, I haven't been a leader in very many organizations. I've seen fake people most of the time presenting themselves, even in the board meetings. You see, they are fake. So this age of fake result has seen that most people's lives are now financed by what? Credit. And most governments around the world are now seen by many to be sincerely corrupt. The answer, therefore, to all of this is that we need to get back to the age of reproduction. We need to go back to the production line. And this will only be driven by those who are dare to think outside of the box. Those who dare to think outside of the normal curve. Those who are there to figure out how reality really works in this day. Those who think out of age. Those who dare to tackle the problem we face in our society today. For example, in this coronavirus, I said things before, and people will say, these are things you have said. I said, well, it's not that what I have said. We need to put things in order. Do what you need to do per day and do it creditably, do it skillfully. And if you don't know something, ask and put it in order, because you don't know what will come tomorrow. You don't know what will come by 12 midday today. So let's look at discrimination versus, I haven't said that. Let's look at discrimination versus racism. Racism and discrimination are two concepts that are similar to each other, and perhaps the most denounced concepts the world over. The feeling that my race is better or superior to that your own race or to your person makes people belonging to a particular race or even religion behave arrogantly. This will make people to belong to some certain clubs. This will make people to belong to certain affiliations in a way that can at best be described as discriminatory. Thus, racism is also discrimination, better referred to as racial discrimination. There are many who find it difficult to differentiate between racism and discrimination, though it is clear that racism is a category of discrimination. Now, let's take a closer look at these two concepts. Discrimination is a broad, generic term that we all are aware of. Right from our childhood, we learn to discriminate between things based upon our preferences and according to how things are perceived and approved by our elders and peers and our society. Treatment of people based upon their gender, race, community, color of skin, facial features, height, for example, stereotyping all people of Hispanic origin having a biased attitude towards them is a classic example of discrimination based on racial affinities. The word discrimination was mostly used in American Civil War for the practice of prejudicial treatment of blacks and whites. So, however, discrimination is not confined to color of skin, as gender inequality has also given to rise to gender discrimination, whereby women are treated in a prejudicial manner by men in nearly all cultures of the world. You, my listeners, now you will know the kind of prejudice and discrimination you face in your own family, in your own society, the background where you come from. What am I saying? Women get assaulted and even raped by men. They receive lesser salaries and facilities in workplaces and even do not rise to top positions in some companies, in some organizations. This is always discriminatory. So racism, the belief that one's own culture and race is far superior to others, and treating members of other races as inferior is called racism. The most famous form of racism the world ever saw resulted in the Holocaust, or killings of hundreds of thousands of Jews by Nazis during the Second World War in Germany. If one looks up to dictionary and define racism as a belief that the abilities and characteristics of other races are inferior to one's own, this belief leads to changes in behavior and attitude towards members of other groups and minorities. So, as we come to a close of this lecture, I want you to understand what is the difference between discrimination and racism. Discrimination is a practice of preferential or prejudicial treatment of people based upon ostensible differences between people such as gender, 1, 2, age, 3, color of skin, 4, racial affinities, and many more. Racism is a subcategory of discrimination that is a practice of prejudicial treatment of people of other races, groups, communities, because of feelings of superiority over one's race. So, as we just round up, what is discrimination? The term discrimination refers to the unjust or prejudicial treatment of other individuals or groups or specific people. So, sex, gender, race, age, skin color, physical features, language, disability, health problems, and sexual orientation. So, as you begin to look at these things, just note that the basis of wanting you to know more about this is for you to understand the basis of these things. So, God help you as you go on this journey. May God help you. If you have questions, let me have it. You can ask your questions, or you send your questions through email or whatever you want to know better. If you have questions, let's have it now. I'll be open for your questions. If you have questions, let's look at it as you prepare for your exam. And make sure you submit all your assignments. Put your center, put your number, possibly put your telephone number. Your email should be clear, your name should be clear, your center should be clear. Let me have your questions. Well, if there's no question, I wish you success. Keep safe in everything you do. Follow the instructions, social distancing, and all the rest. My prayer is that you will live beyond now and you tend to understand more, and the blessing of the Lord will be upon you. You and your household will live. You get through this period and all will be well. So, once again, I appreciate you enrolling and God bless you. Remember that the core objectives you need to put into consideration as you go.